Your brain runs one process more than any other: filtering. Right now, millions of signals are competing for your attention. Light, sound, temperature, background noise you stopped hearing 10 minutes ago. Your brain can't process all of it, so it decides. It assigns priority tags to certain categories of information and blocks everything else before you're even aware it existed. This means you are not seeing reality. You are seeing what your brain has decided is worth showing you, and the tags that determine what gets through. You didn't choose them. Your sustained attention did, automatically, over months and years, based on what you kept returning to, what you spent time on, what you gave weight to. The tags formed without your permission, and now they run without your oversight. Two people can sit in the same room, hear the same conversation, look at the same evidence, and perceive completely different realities. Not because one is smarter, but because their filters are waving through different information and blocking different information. Each one is seeing a version of reality their brain has constructed for them, and each one believes they are seeing the whole picture. Here's what should concern you. Intelligence doesn't fix this. Intelligence makes it worse. A sharper mind doesn't produce less biased filters, it produces more sophisticated ones. Better justifications for what the filter already decided. More eloquent explanations for why the blocked information didn't matter. The smarter you are, the harder it is to catch your own brain lying to you. This is Axiom 5, one of 46 I have systematized from neuroscience, philosophy, and years of pattern analysis in my own life and in fiction. It explains why the most capable people often produce the most catastrophic blind spots. The filter doesn't care how smart you are. It follows your sustained attention, not your intentions. Kim Wexler is the most intelligent character in Better Call Saul. More competent than Jimmy. More disciplined than Howard. More strategic than anyone who underestimated her. And across 6 seasons, her brain filtered out every warning, every off-ramp, every piece of evidence that contradicted the priority her attention had set. While she told herself she was focused on something else entirely. 3 scenes, same filter. And by the end, you will recognize yours. But first, a metaphor that makes the whole mechanic visible. Think of your focus like a traffic officer at a busy intersection. Millions of cars, that's information, are trying to get through every second. The officer can only wave so many through, so they decide based on priority tags. Whatever is being tagged as important gets waved through. Everything else gets blocked. You never even see it. But you don't assign those tags. And the officer doesn't keep the same ones forever. It watches what you do, where your attention actually goes, hour after hour, day after day, and it rewrites the priority list based on your behavior, not your intentions, your behavior. This means the officer is a learning system. It updates constantly, and it updates based on one input, what you repeatedly attend to. Watch how this works. You have a bad experience at work. You get passed over, undercut, embarrassed. You spend 3 days replaying it, analyzing what happened, thinking about what you should have said. Your officer is watching all of that. It doesn't know you're processing a wound. It just registers. This person keeps attending to threat at work. Tag workplace threat as high priority. Now the tag is set. And once it's set, the officer waves through every piece of information that confirms workplace threat, a colleague's tone, an email that could be read 2 ways, a meeting you weren't invited to. The confirming evidence arrives effortlessly. Meanwhile, the colleague who complimented your work last Tuesday, the email from your manager praising the project, blocked. The officer didn't flag them because positive workplace signals wasn't tagged as priority. And here's what makes this dangerous for smart people specifically. A more sophisticated officer doesn't make better decisions. It makes more convincing justifications for the same biased decisions. If you are analytical, your officer doesn't just block contradicting information, it generates a reason why that information didn't matter. The sharper you are, the faster that reason arrives, and the more persuasive it sounds. So here's a question, and I don't need you to answer it out loud. Just notice. What are you scanning for right now in your life? Not what you want to focus on. What actually jumps out at you without effort? What do you notice before you have decided to notice it? That is what your traffic officer is waving through. That's your actual focus, not the version you would describe if someone asked, but the pattern running underneath all day. In every Kim scene, watch where her attention actually goes. Not what she says she wants. Not what she tells herself she's focused on. Where her attention lives. Watch for the gap between what she says she intends and where her attention actually goes. That's the whole game. Kim started as a rule follower. She believed the system worked. Follow the rules, do good work, and advancement follows. Watch what happens when that focus fails her. And watch where her traffic officer learns to wade through something new. There's a case that changes everything for Kim. The Kettlemans. HM assigned Kim to keep these clients, a county treasurer and his wife, who embezzled $1.6 million and are facing serious time. She does everything right. She works the DA. She prepares the best deal the prosecution will offer. 16 months in a county facility instead of 30 years in prison. She presents it logically, professionally, the way she's been trained. But the Kettlemans fire her anyway. They are convinced they can beat the charges. They refuse to admit guilt. And because Kim relies on the rules of the system, she loses them. In the parking lot afterward, she diagnoses the cost immediately. She tells Jimmy,
"That prick firing you?
Best case scenario is my 2-year plan just became a 10-year plan.
That schmuck. You didn't do anything wrong."
I lost the client.
but then, listen to where her attention goes next. She stops lamenting the unfairness and spots the mechanic.
It's a loser case. That deal was their best chance.
There has to be a way.
Not without the money. It's the only chip those Kettlemans have, and they refuse to play it.
She's not focused on the ethics anymore. She's identifying the lever. She is telling Jimmy exactly what needs to happen. The money has to be the leverage. Jimmy hears this. He goes out and finds the money. He runs a scam to blackmail the Kettlemans into returning.
Criminals have no recourse, and you two, you're criminals. You're gonna go back to her, you're gonna apologize for your hasty decision to terminate her services, and you're gonna fall on her mercy and take that deal.
And it works. The Kettlemans come back to Kim. The deal she wanted is signed. And in the elevator afterward, Kim doesn't scold him. She looks at Jimmy as the doors close and mouths the words. She learns that when following the rules fails her, running a scam delivers. This is the origin point. Kim's traffic officer just learned a new priority tag. She focused on the system reward ethical behavior, and then the system punished her for it. She focused on doing it right, and doing it right got her exiled. Then she watched leverage produce the result her ethics could not. Her traffic officer updated. Flag leverage as important. Flag what actually works over what should work. This is season 1. The seed is planted. She doesn't know it yet, but her focus just shifted. Not because she decided to become someone different, but because her attention learned what to wave through. And because Kim is sharp, trained to analyze evidence and construct arguments, her officer learned faster than most. A less intelligent person might have taken years to internalize the lesson. Kim internalized it in a parking lot. You had this moment too. Not necessarily with a law career, but you had a moment where doing things the right way failed you, and you watched someone take a shortcut and get the result you deserved. Maybe at work, where the person who played politics got promoted over the person who did the actual work. Maybe in a relationship, where being honest cost you something that being strategic would have preserved. And something in your filter shifted. Not because you decided to become cynical, because your officer learned a new priority tag, just like Kim's did. It flagged what actually works over what should work. And because you're probably someone who processes quickly, who analyzes and draws conclusions efficiently, your officer didn't need years to learn the lesson. It learned it in a single moment of contrast. The sharper the mind, the faster the filter updates. The question isn't whether the shift happened. It's what your traffic officer started flagging as important after that. This is Axiom 5. What you focus on becomes your reality. Not what you want, not what you intend. What you actually focus on, where your attention lives through the day. Now, you've probably heard a version of this before. Mainstream manifestation has been teaching this for decades. Visualize your goal and believe. Focus on what you want, and you'll attract it. The advice sounds reasonable. It sounds like what I just described. And that's exactly why it doesn't work, because it sounds right while getting the mechanism completely wrong. Here's the math. Your visualization session is 10 minutes. Your waking day is roughly 16 hours. That means your visualization represents less than 1% of your total focus time. The other 99% scanning for threats, monitoring weather is working, checking your bank account, rehearsing what could go wrong, noticing what you don't have. That's the actual instruction set. That's what your traffic officer is following all day. So you sit down, visualize abundance for 10 minutes, then spend 15 hours and 15 minutes attending to lack. Which instruction do you think the officer follows? The 10-minute request or the 15-hour pattern? This is why visualization fails for most people. Not because visualization is wrong, but because it's 1% of the input trying to override 99%. The officer doesn't follow your morning session. It follows your sustained attention. And your sustained attention is almost always pointed somewhere you didn't consciously choose. This is the gap nobody talks about. The gap between what you intend during your practice and what your attention actually does the rest of the day. Kim had this exact gap. She told herself she was focused on career success, pro bono justice, helping the Sandpiper elders. That was her 10-minute visualization, the story she told herself about her priorities. But her traffic officer was waving through something else entirely for the other 15 hours. Leverage, control, the power to decide who deserves consequences. So what actually determines your reality? Not your visualization, not your intentions, your sustained attention pattern, the aggregate of where your focus lives across the full 16 hours. This is the master law. Everything else in the framework builds on it. Your sustained focus determines what your brain confirms, what opportunities you see, what threats you perceive, what reality you inhabit. And the key isn't visualizing a goal, it's inhabiting the state of already having it. Not for 10 minutes. As your baseline operating state. Living from the end means your traffic officer's default instruction is waves through information consistent with already having this. Not hoping, not monitoring, not checking whether it's coming, already there. That is what deactivates the scarcity alarm, the panic that keeps broadcasting "I don't have it yet" into everything the officer processes. And I want to be clear, this is not about ignoring reality and pretending. You can acknowledge current circumstances without focusing on them. The distinction matters. Acknowledge, redirect, hold the end state. That's the sequence. But most people skipped the redirect. They acknowledge, then dwell, then wonder why dwelling produced more of what they were dwelling on. If this model is correct, we should be able to predict exactly why your manifestation practice isn't working. Let's test it. You track your intentions. You track your visualization sessions. You track how many affirmations you said. But you don't audit the background process, the 15 hours of monitoring, checking, waiting for evidence, scanning for threats. If the traffic officer model is right, that background process is the real instruction set, and that is what's creating your results. Kim made the same mistake. She tracked what she told herself she cared about. She never measured where her attention actually went. And here's what makes this particularly brutal for analytical people. Your monitoring system is more elaborate than most. You don't just fail to audit your focus. You build sophisticated explanations for why your current focus is correct. You research. You gather evidence. You construct arguments. And every one of those activities feels like awareness. It feels like you are paying attention. But your traffic officer is selecting which evidence you find, which arguments feel compelling, which research confirms what you already believe. The more analytical you are, the more meticulous your confirmation feels, the harder it is to recognize that meticulousness is bias. The reason visualize and believe feels correct is because the visualization session creates a brief state shift. For those 10 minutes, you genuinely felt different. The problem isn't the session, it's what happens after. The shift isn't sustained, and it's sustained attention, not momentary attention, that programs the officer. So the brief spike of abundance gets overwritten by hours of default scarcity. And the next morning, you visualize again, feel the spike again, and conclude the practice is working because the spike feels real. It is real. It's just not the mechanism. I believe that people frustrated with manifestation, as well as those who dismiss it as woo, should understand why it fails and how it must be defended, the mechanics, the timeline, the internal struggle, not just be told to visualize, detach, and believe. Kim's tragedy isn't mystical, it's mechanical. And that's what makes it fixable, if you understand what to fix. She didn't know where her focus actually was. Now, knowing how the traffic officer works, knowing it follows sustained attention and not stated intentions, what do you think happens when Kim has to choose between personal safety and the thrill of the scam? When she knows a cartel assassin is alive and hunting, where does her officer send her attention? So we are in season 6. A cartel assassin shot Howard Handling in Kim's apartment, someone who was never supposed to be there. Kim and Jimmy are processing what happened, and Kim is about to say something out loud that she's never admitted. Not to Jimmy, not to herself. Watch where her stated focus was, and watch where she finally admits her attention actually lived. Jimmy is trying to make sense of it. His defense is frantic but reasonable.
I love you too. But so what?
No, Kim, you're wrong. This is about Howard. Okay, what happened to him wasn't on us. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't my fault. It was that fucking Lalo Salamanca.
It's a clean story. A cartel killer showed up. Howard was in the wrong place. They couldn't have known. Kim's response cuts through it.
I knew.
You knew what?
I knew he was alive.
No, you didn't.
It was about a month ago.
And you didn't tell me?
She knew Lalo was alive. Mike told her weeks before the shooting. She knew the threat was active, and she hid it from Jimmy. She starts with the rationalization, the cover story she's been telling herself.
I thought it was a 1 in a million chance that he'd come for us. I thought he would be caught if he did, and I told myself I was protecting you.
Then she stops, and she admits the mechanic.
But that's not the truth. The real reason I didn't tell you was because I knew what you'd do. You'd blame yourself. You'd fear for me. You'd want us to run and hide until you were sure I was safe. You would pull the plug on the scam, and then we'd break up.
And then the smoking gun.
And I didn't want that. Because I was having too much fun.
For 6 seasons, Kim told herself her focus was on justice, on helping the little guy. But when the choice came between safety and the scam, she chose the scam. Her traffic officer waved through the phone and blocked the danger. That's what got priority tagged. That's what her attention returned to, again and again. And everything that contradicted it, including a survival level threat from a cartel assassin, got blocked. She knew Lalo was alive, and she filtered it out, because letting it through would have ended the fun. She focused on the sensation. Reality delivered the sensation's cost. A dead man in her living room, a marriage ending, a life she has to rebuild from rubble. The mechanic was now operating without her conscious participation. She knew Lalo was alive. The information existed, but her officer blocked it anyway. You have a stated focus too. I want abundance. I want the relationship. I want the career. That's what you would say if someone asked. But where does your attention actually live? When you're not actively manifesting, when you're just existing, what are you scanning for? Threats, evidence it's not working, reasons to doubt, proof that you're behind, that others have it easier, that something's wrong. If you are honest, really honest, you might find your real focus is something you don't want to admit. Not because it's shameful, because admitting it means you can't pretend anymore that the gap doesn't exist. Kim didn't want to admit she was having fun. It took a dead man in her apartment to force the confession. What don't you want to admit you are focused on? The confession explains the endpoint. But how did Kim get here? What made her vulnerable to this particular pattern? Kim Wexler didn't start corrupted. She started with nothing and built everything through the rules. She grew up in Red Cloud, Nebraska, poor. Her family never owned a house. She and her mother moved constantly, fleeing temporary residence before eviction caught up with them. In 1984, teenage Kim got caught shoplifting a pair of earrings and a necklace. The store manager brought her mother in, expecting accountability. Kim's mother put on a performance, admonished her daughter, threatened to take the value out of her allowance. The manager let them go. Outside the store, Kim's mother dropped the act. She didn't care. In fact, she had shoplifted the same items herself. She handed them to Kim like a prize. And Kim sat in the car, staring out the window. That's the origin of Kim's ethics. She watched her mother take shortcuts and produce chaos, instability, poverty that never ended because the rules never applied. So Kim decided she would be different. She would earn it. She moved to Colorado, put herself through college, moved to Albuquerque, enrolled in law school, found a job in the mailroom at Hamlin and McGill. The firm paid for her tuition, and she felt the weight of that debt. She worked her way up, not through charm, not through shortcuts, through competence. She became one of HHM's go-to litigators. Kim built her identity of being the one who follows the rules and succeeds anyway, the one who doesn't need her mother's methods, the one who earns it clean. And then the Kettleman case happened, and following the rules produced failure. And she watched Jimmy's methods produce the result her ethics couldn't touch. In Season 5, Kim's pattern has been escalating. She's been running schemes with Jimmy, and Howard Hamlin notices. Howard confronts her directly. He leads the damage.
He threw bowling balls over my front gate. Then, a couple of weeks later, I'm having lunch with Cliff Main, and I'm accosted by two prostitutes. I confronted Jimmy about it. He all but confessed.
And that's it?
Howard's warning is objective reality.
Sorry.
Laugh if you want, but no person in their right mind would behave the way Jimmy has. We are talking about someone who's not in control of himself.
Watch where Kim's focus goes. She doesn't hear the warning about Jimmy's instability. She hears Howard's tone. She focuses on the insult of him trying to save her. She laughs at him. And then she delivers the line that seals her fate.
Do you have any idea how insulting that is? I make my own decisions. For my own reasons.
You gotta listen to me. The man needs help.
Howard, I know Jimmy, and you're wrong.
Her traffic officer blocked the survival information and waved through what felt like an ego attack. And notice how fast it happened. Howard barely finished his sentence before Kim had a complete counter-narrative. This isn't a warning, it's condescension. A less sharp person might have needed time to construct that reframe. Kim's intelligence delivered instantly, polished, articulate, and completely wrong. I make my own decisions for my own reasons. It's not a dumb person's denial. It's a brilliant person's real-time rationalization. The sharpest mind in the room, dismissing the most obvious warning in the room in under 5 seconds. That same night, in a hotel room, she proposes the scorched earth plan against Howard. She calculates the settlement money.
Last I heard, Sandpiper was willing to go to 26 million.
A third of that is 8.5.
And 20% of that is...
Around 2 mil. But it's not happening.
Even Jimmy tries to stop her. He tells her,
Kim doing this, it's not you. You would not be okay with it. Not in the cold light of day.
he appeals to the identity she used to have. Kim looks at him.
Kim, you're shitting me, right?
The transition is complete. She's not the rule follower anymore. She's the one who decides. This raises a question. How does this actually work in the brain? Why does sustained focus creates matching reality? And why couldn't Kim see the warnings that were right in front of her? So how does this actually work in the brain? It's not mystical. There's a specific structure responsible for it. Your thalamus sits at the center of your brain. Every piece of sensory information passes through it before reaching your conscious awareness. It's the literal gatekeeper. And it doesn't let everything through. It assigns what neuroscientists call value tags to incoming information. High value tag. You see it. Low value tag. Blocked. You never know it existed. The critical question is, what determines the tags? Not your intentions, not your goals, your sustained attention. Whatever you've repeatedly attended to, the thalamus flags as high value. Whatever you've ignored, it flags as low value. And this isn't a metaphor. Your brain physically rewires based on sustained focus. Think of the London taxi driver study at University College London. Drivers who spent years memorizing every street in London showed measurable growth in their hippocampus. Their brains physically expanded through focused practice. The attention didn't just change their knowledge, it changed their anatomy. This is what Dr. Tara Swart documented in her neuroscience research at MIT. Your thalamus literally assigns priority tasks based on sustained attention. The traffic officer isn't a metaphor, it's anatomy, and the tasks are physical, neural pathways that strengthened with repetition and weakened without it. Kim spent years focusing on leverage and control. Her thalamus rewired to flag opportunities for those exact things. The opportunities were always there, but her value tags weren't flagging them until her sustained attention trained them to. And once trained, the tags operate automatically. She didn't have to decide to notice leverage. Her thalamus noticed it for her. But there's a second layer to this. It's not just that your brain filters information, it's that your thoughts multiply. You start with one fearful thought, and that thought generates related thoughts. What if this happens? What about that risk? Those thoughts generate more thoughts. Each one spawns variations, elaborations, scenarios. Your focus doesn't stay still, it reproduces. Watch how this played out with Kim. Her focus on "I decided who deserves consequences" generated thoughts about Howard deserving them. Those generated plans for the scheme. The plans generated justifications. The justifications generated excitement about execution. One focus seed, through recursive expansion, eventually organized her entire reality around a single priority. Douglas Hofstadter won a Pulitzer Prize for mapping exactly this process. He calls it recursive enumeration, patterns that self-replicate and expand. Your thoughts aren't static. They are generative. One focused seed produces a forest, and the forest grows whether you're watching it or not. This is why small focus shifts become total life transformations. You're not just changing one thought, you're seeding a recursive process. Change the seed, and the entire forest that grows from it changes. And this is where it gets dangerous, because there's a guard standing between you and any attempt to change your focus. Your ego, the totalitarian ego. Your ego has a stake in protecting your current focus. Once you've invested attention in a frame like "I'm the one in control," your ego treats that frame as your identity. Challenges to the frame feel like attacks on you. When Howard warned Kim, it wasn't just information. It was a threat to the identity her focus had built. His warning implied she wasn't in control. Her ego couldn't tolerate that, so it filtered the life-saving content and amplified the condescension. Your ego does this too. When evidence contradicts your current frame, your ego reframes the input as an attack. And the more intelligent you are, the more elaborate your ego's defense system becomes. A simple mind produces simple denial. That's not true. A sophisticated mind produces layered rationalization, context, nuance, exceptions, counterexamples, all arriving in milliseconds, all feeling like critical thinking rather than defense. And your traffic officer, your thalamus, blocks it before you can even evaluate it. This is happening to you right now. Whatever you've been attending to is compounding. If you focus on lack, you generate thoughts of lack, which produce evidence of lack. Suddenly, lack is everywhere, not because reality changed, but because your brain restructured to see it. Kim focused on the thrill of control until she couldn't see the warnings anymore. Her system simply stopped flagging them. You've seen focus shift. You've seen it compound. You've seen it become identity. Now watch the mechanic's final stage. Maintenance. Once your filter has built a reality, you have to keep building it. The construction doesn't stop when the result arrives. It accelerates, because now you have to defend, explain, and deepen what your focus created. HHM Memorial Service. Howard Hamlin is dead, but the guests are whispering about the story Kim and Jimmy planted, that Howard was a drug addict. Howard's widow, Cheryl, corners Kim.
I know people are saying he was on drugs. Are you hearing all of this? Because none of it makes sense to me.
Cheryl, maybe we should just...
I don't care what people are saying. I don't care what the police think. Howard was not on drugs. That simply is not true.
This is Kim's final off-ramp. Cheryl is staring her in the face, offering her a way out. Watch where Kim's filter sends her attention. It doesn't go to the widow's pain. It doesn't go to the truth. It goes to protecting the reality her focus built. She looks Cheryl in the eye and invents a memory on the spot.
It was about 1.5 years ago. I was still an associate here, working late on a brief, and I saw a light on in Howard's office. I assumed the cleaning crew left it on by mistake. And Howard was there at his desk, head down, and he was snorting something.
Cheryl grumbles. Kim's filter just did something remarkable. It took a survival level moment, a widow begging for truth, a clear exit from the lie, and tagged it as a threat to be neutralized rather than an opportunity to escape. Her intelligence didn't help her see the off-ramp. It helped her construct a more convincing lie in real time. The sharper the mind, the more effective the maintenance. This is the stage most people never think about. Your filter doesn't just create a result and stop. It recruits you into maintaining that result. For months, Kim focused on Howard as target. Her traffic officer waved through every justification, every plan, every reason he deserved what was coming. Her thoughts kept multiplying. A new identity formed. And now she has to live inside the reality that focus created. The lie requires ongoing construction. Every conversation, every memorial, every interaction with Cheryl, Kim has to keep feeding the filter. The reality her attention created now requires her continued attention to survive. This is the cost the title promised. The sharpest mind in the room missed every warning, and now she's using the same sharpness to maintain the reality those missed warnings produced. When you focus on someone as the problem, you don't just experience the conflict. You have to maintain the story. There's someone in your life, maybe an ex, maybe a parent, maybe a former friend, and you have a narrative about them, what they did, how they wronged you, why you're justified in feeling what you feel. And every time their name comes up, you tell the story again. You add details. You remember new evidence. You explain to whoever's listening why the situation is what it is. You're not just recalling, you are constructing. Each retelling lays another brick. Kim looked Cheryl in the eye and invented a memory to protect the story her focus had built. She wasn't just lying, she was maintaining. Her filter had built a reality, and now her intelligence was being used to defend it. What story are you maintaining about someone? What narrative requires your continued construction every time it comes up? What relationship reality are you actively building? Not because it's the only truth available, but because your focus chose that frame, and now you have to live inside it. The question isn't whether you're right about them. Maybe you are. The question is, what is your traffic officer waving through every time you think of them? And is that serving the reality you actually want? You've seen yourself through this. The moment when following the rules produced failure, and something in your focus shifted. The identity your focus has been compounding. The conversations where you maintain and defend the limiting narrative. The pattern operates in how you evaluate options. And you have already watched it run twice in Kim's story. You just didn't have names for it yet. You watched Kim dismiss Howard's warning before he finished speaking. Her traffic officer had already flagging him as threat to ego, not source of information. The content of what he said never made it through. She rejected survival level information in under 5 seconds, not because she evaluated, but because her officer had already decided what to wave through. You do this too. An opportunity appears, a job posting, a connection, an invitation. Before you have investigated, you already know why it won't work. Wrong timing. Not quite right. Probably too competitive. You reject it in the first 3 seconds. That's not you being discerning. That's your traffic officer running the same pattern Kim's ran, The reasons it won't work arrive before you've gathered any data. You're not evaluating. You are confirming. How many opportunities have you dismissed in seconds? Not after research, not after considerations. In seconds, because your officer already knew what to wade through. And you watch Kim gather evidence that supported the Howard scheme while ignoring everything that contradicted it. Mike's warnings, Jimmy's hesitation, her own off-ramps. She researched her target. She built her case. It felt true. But her officer pre-selected which evidence she'd find compelling. The same pattern is running in your decisions right now. You're making a decision whether to pursue something, whether to trust someone, whether to take a risk. And you research, you gather information. That feels responsible. But watch what information you are gathering. Are you seeking data to make the best decision? Or are you seeking data to confirm the decision your focus already made? If you are focused on "this won't work," you'll find evidence it won't work. If you are focused on "this person can be trusted," you'll find evidence of untrustworthiness. The research feels objective, but your traffic officer isn't. And if you are someone who prides yourself of being meticulous, on making evidence-based decisions, this trap is specifically designed for you. Your meticulousness becomes the camouflage. The more data you gather, the more objective it feels, and the less likely you are to notice that your officer pre-selected which data you will find compelling. What decision are you currently making? And what evidence is your traffic officer waving through versus blocking? This isn't limited to manifestation practice. It's operating in your career, your relationships, your daily decisions. Where does your attention go when you're not actively directing it? What do you scan for automatically? What information jumps out at you before you have decided to look for it? If you're scanning for threats at work, you'll see threats. If you are scanning for evidence you are behind, you'll see everyone ahead. If you are scanning for reasons this won't work, you'll find them, not because they are the only reality available, but because your traffic officer is waving them through and blocking everything else. The question is whether you're honest enough to audit where your focus actually lives. Right now, not as a hypothetical, but actually. What has your attention been for the last week? Not your intentions, your attention. What have you been checking? What have you been defending? What have you been monitoring? And if you are honest, is that attention on the state of having what you want? Or is it on the absence of what you want, dressed up as working toward it? This is just confirmation bias. That's what part of your brain is saying right now. Kim saw what she wanted to see. She filtered reality based on existing beliefs. That's psychology, not manifestation. You are pattern matching on a TV show and calling it cosmic law. You're right, and you're also making my point. Confirmation bias is real, and the skeptical objection isn't stupid, it's accurate. Honestly, most manifestation teaching deserves that criticism. Unfalsifiable claims, circular logic. It works if you believe, and if it didn't work, you didn't believe enough. I understand why that triggers your bullshit detector. It should. What the skeptical framing misses. Confirmation bias is the mechanism. That's not the objection, that's the explanation. Your brain physically restructured based on sustained attention. That's neuroplasticity research from UCL and MIT, not mysticism. Your focus determines what evidence your brain collects. The question isn't whether confirmation bias is real. Obviously, it is. The question is, what are you confirming? Kim's bias toward I decided who deserves consequences filtered her entire reality. Every piece of evidence that said stop got blocked. Every piece of evidence that said this is fun got through. Confirmation bias isn't the objection to manifestation. It's the mechanism of manifestation. I'm not asking you to believe anything on faith. I'm asking you to audit your focus for 1 week. Track where your attention actually goes. Not your intentions, your attention. Notice what your traffic officer waves through without effort. Notice what you never see until someone points it out. If this axiom is wrong and it doesn't apply to you, the audit will show you. If it's right and applies to you, you have evidence you generated on your own. So let me give you the test, a way to audit your focus and see what your brain has been confirming. Starting in the next 24 hours. So what do you do with this? Your first instinct will be to force the new focus. Clench your jaw and think about abundance. Willpower your way into a new attention pattern. That's the same approach you will take with another problem. Identify the issue, apply effort, and push through. But willpower is a manual override running against an automatic system. Your traffic officer runs continuously, for free, without your input. Willpower costs energy every second it operates. This is why New Year's resolutions failed by February. The resolution is manual. The old pattern is automatic, and manual always loses to automatic in a war of attrition. Kim didn't force herself to focus on leverage. Her officer learned it automatically through sustained attention at the Kettleman case. It learned because she attended to it, not because she decided to attend to it. The officer follows behavior, not intention. Retraining works the same way in reverse. not through force, but through sustained redirection until the new instruction becomes automatic. You cannot white-knuckle your attention into a new pattern. You have to retrain the officer. And you cannot retrain something you haven't identified. Here's how you do it, and the order matters. You cannot redirect focus you haven't identified. That's why the audit comes first. You cannot identify the gap without data. That's why tracking comes before analysis. You cannot retrain without knowing what to retrain toward. That's why the gap diagnosis comes before the redirect. And redirection fails if you're still feeding the old pattern. That's why starving comes last. 4 steps. Each one depends on the one before it. Step number 1. Audit before you adjust. You cannot redirect focus you haven't identified. So for 3 days, not forever, just 3 days, track where your attention actually goes. Every time you catch yourself thinking, write down what you're thinking about. Not judging, not analyzing, just capturing. Thinking about bills. Thinking about what she or he said. Thinking about whether the visualization is working. Thinking about that comment. Why this works mechanically. Your traffic officer operates below conscious awareness. You literally don't know what is waving through until you interrupt the automatic process and capture a sample. The act of writing forces the thought from automatic processing into conscious registration, like pulling a random car over at the intersection and checking its priority tag. 3 days of random sampling gives you enough data to see the pattern your officer is actually running. Don't try to change anything yet. You are gathering data. By the end of the 3 days, you'll see your traffic officer's actual priorities, not what you think you focus on, but what you actually focus on. Step number 2. Identify the gap. Once you have your data, compare your stated intention to your tracked focus. You say you want abundance, but how many of your tracked thoughts were about bills, lack, and what you cannot afford? You say you want the relationship, but how many were about past wounds, fear of rejection, or imposing unrealistic standards to justify your loneliness? You say you want the career, but how many were about why it's not working? What's blocking you? How far behind you are? Why this works mechanically? The gap between your stated focus and your tracked focus is your diagnosis. It's the distance between the instruction you think you are giving your officer and the instruction your officer is actually following. Kim's gap was gigantic. She stated justice and career, while her officer followed leverage and control. Your gap may be smaller, but any gap at all means your officer is running instructions you didn't consciously choose. Step number 3. Redirect the officer. Now you can start retraining. Your thalamus responds to sustained attention, and here's the critical mechanic. It can't hold 2 contradictory priority tags at full strength simultaneously. When you redirect attention to what would I notice if it was already done, you're not fighting the old tag. You're giving the officer a competing instruction. Sustained repetition of the new instruction weakens the old tag's priority. You are not overpowering the filter. You are retraining it through repetition, the same way Kim's filter retrained itself in the parking lot, except you are choosing the direction. When you catch yourself monitoring for lag, redirect to what would I notice if it was already done. When you catch yourself checking for evidence it's working, redirect to what will someone who already has this be thinking about instead. You're not forcing belief. You are redirecting attention. There is a difference. Belief is a conclusion you reach. Attention is a muscle you train. You train muscles through repetition, not through deciding they are already strong. Step number 4. Starve the old priority. Finally, you have to stop feeding the pattern you are trying to break. Your officer strengthens tags through repetition. Every time you attend to the old pattern, you are reinforcing the tag. Kim couldn't stop because she kept feeding the old focus. Every conversation about the Howard Kim fed, I decide who deserves consequences. Every escalation reinforced the pattern. Why this works mechanically? Neural pathways that aren't used weaken over time. Neuroscientists call this synaptic pruning. The old priority tag doesn't disappear overnight, but without repeated activation, it loses strength. The officer checks it less frequently. The automatic scanning slows. Eventually, the old tag drops below the threshold for automatic processing, and the new tag takes over as default. You have equivalents that fit your old tags. Doom scrolling, complaint sessions with friends, realistic assessments of why things aren't working, conversations where you rehearse your limitations out loud. Every one of these is a repetition that strengthens the old priority. Identify what fits your current focus. Reduce it. You don't have to eliminate it overnight. Just reduce the feeding frequency. Less repetition, weaker priority tag. If the traffic officer model is correct, here's what you should expect when you run this audit. Your captured thoughts will cluster around your actual priorities, not your stated ones. If all 3 captures tomorrow are about lag, threat, or monitoring, that's your officer's real instruction set, no matter what you told yourself your focus was. If even one capture is about the state of already having what you want, you have a foothold to build from. So let's test it. Here's your experiment for the next 24 hours. Not 3 days. That's the full audit. This is the immediate test. Set 3 alarms on your phone tomorrow. Random times. Morning, midday, evening. Don't put them at predictable intervals. When each alarm goes off, immediately write down, what was I just thinking about? Just capture the thought that was running when the alarm interrupted you. At the end of the day, look at your 3 captures. That's a sample of your actual focus. That's what your traffic officer is waving through when you're not consciously directing attention. You don't need to believe in focus mechanics for this to work. You don't need to believe in manifestation. And you don't need to believe in me. You just need to capture 3 thoughts and look at them. That's not fate, that's data. If the data shows your focus is already where you want it, great. Keep doing what you're doing. If the data shows your focus is somewhere else, now you know what to redirect. Either way, you'll have evidence you generated on your own. And that's more valuable than anything I can tell you. Kim Wexler was the smartest character in Better Call Saul, and she proved that intelligence doesn't protect you from this mechanic, it amplifies it. A sharper mind builds more sophisticated filters, generates better justifications, and constructs more convincing maintenance stories. The sharpest minds don't miss less warnings. They miss them more elegantly. The mechanic doesn't care about your intelligence. It doesn't care whether your focus is noble or destructive. It doesn't care whether your intentions are good or selfish. Your traffic officer waves through what you have trained it to wave through. Kim didn't fail because she lacked awareness. She failed because she never measured the one thing her awareness couldn't see, its own filter. Her thalamus was following her actual focus, the fun, the leverage, the control, instead of her stated focus, the justice, the career, the ethics. To change your reality, you don't change your beliefs, you change the instructions you give your internal traffic officer. The question isn't whether you're smart enough to escape this. You are not. No one is. The question is whether you're honest enough to audit where your focus actually lives, and disciplined enough to retrain it. If this explains something about your patterns, subscribe. I have 46 axioms systematized. This is one of them. Each addresses a different failure point, a different place where the mechanics break down and people get stuck. You don't need more motivation, you need mechanics. If you keep attending to lack while hoping for abundance, you'll keep confirming lack. If you audit your actual attention and redirect it, you'll change what your brain confirms. That's not fate, that's neuroplasticity. Understand why it's failing. Learn to defend it. The mechanics, the timeline, the internal struggle. That's the work. Kim's pattern is about focus creating reality, but there's a question underneath. Why couldn't she stop? She saw the warnings. She knew it was dangerous. Howard told her directly. Jimmy tried to pump the brakes, and she chose to ignore every off-ramp. That's not a focus problem anymore. That's a prison problem. When the rules you follow aren't being enforced by anyone but you. When the bars only exist because you keep gripping them. That's a different mechanic entirely. I made a video about that. Dream from the Sandman, an eternal entity who follows rules no one is enforcing, and what that costs him. If Kim shows you what happens when the filter runs unchecked, Dream shows you what happens when you become the warden of your own cage. Link in the description and appearing on your screen. But wherever you go from here, 3 alarms. Tomorrow, when they go off, write down what you were just thinking about. That's your data. That's your audit. That's where we start.